Last autumn, I moved to a small cabin in the woods. It had been a dream of mine for a long time, and finally, after getting a remote job and with regular home prices being through the roof, it actually made sense to go live in a cheap, small place away from everything. Because I knew the drive-in was rough, and the cabin was small, I basically got rid of everything I owned and only brought the essentials, so the move was quick and easy. The guy I bought the cabin from was a young man who was selling his parents' cabin that he didn't want anymore. He said it was well taken care of, and even had some renovations done to it to make it more livable and up to a modern home's standards. From the outside, it still looked very rugged though. On the day I moved in, around sunset, I got an unexpected visit from a man. He introduced himself as Chandler, living in a neighboring cabin in the same area of the woods as me. He was a 40-ish, average-looking guy, and extremely friendly. Over the top, honestly, but I didn't get the feeling that he was faking it. After chatting for 15 minutes, he asked if I would show him around the inside of the cabin. I agreed only because it was mostly empty, and he seemed like he was just curious about the place. He walked around. I mean, it was a small place, so it only took a few minutes to see the entire cabin. But after all the chatting and the tour, the sun was already down, and so naturally I figured he'd see himself out. However, he took a seat on the couch and kept talking. I was still standing up by the door, and being taken aback that I even had to say something, I told him it was getting pretty late and he should probably head back home. He smiled and apologized, getting up and thanking me for the chat, then walked out. He didn't seem to drive here, so I guess he just walked through the dark back to his cabin. I was a little weirded out by the last couple minutes of that interaction, but I told myself I was overreacting, and that he was just friendly, and maybe didn't catch on to the fact that it was late and he should probably just leave. I built up the fireplace and figured out how to use it, then laid back on the couch and tried to decompress. It was interesting just how quiet it was inside the cabin. Just the fireplace crackling and nothing else. A while later, I passed out right there on the couch. When I woke up, the fireplace was still burning, so I'd guess it was no more than 2 hours later. The whole cabin was dark and quiet. I got up and stretched, then headed into the kitchen to get some water and figured I'd probably just shower and go to bed. But while I was filling up a glass, I heard a slight shuffling sound outside the cabin. Close, like just by the front door. I stopped and listened. Not hearing anything for a whole minute, I ended up going to the door and pushing the small curtains aside. This door didn't have a peephole, but was more old-fashioned, having these small windows with little curtains covering them. When I pushed those curtains aside, Chandler was standing right there on the porch. He was visibly startled when I looked at him, and I was probably just as startled. He quickly tried to laugh it off, though, and said he was just about to knock, in that same over-the-top friendly manner. Had to be almost 9 p.m. at this point, so I was very creeped out and unsure about this. Not to mention, I heard him out there for a minute before I went up to the door, so he definitely wasn't just about to knock. Who knows how long he was out there for. "What are you doing back here?" "It's really late, Chandler." I looked behind him as I said that, noticing again he didn't seem to have driven here. He laughed again and said that he just wanted to see if I'd like to join him at his campfire that he was having back at his cabin. I was absolutely not going to, but I asked where his cabin even was. I know he told me it was around here, but I wanted to know where, just so I had an idea of how close he was to me. He pointed at one of the trails that led away from my cabin and said it was just a mile down there. The trail was unsettlingly dark. The whole forest, actually, was completely black. I said no thanks and that I just wanted to chill at my new place for a few days, preferably alone, although I appreciated the gesture. He stayed smiling and said no worries and that he totally understood, but instead of leaving, he looked past me at the fireplace. "Why don't we just hang around here then? I see you've already got a fire going." Now I was even more creeped out, but in a more worried way. I said no in a very strict, stern voice and closed the curtain. I could see his outline standing outside the door still. He stayed there for a strangely long time before finally walking off the porch. I then went back up to the window and watched him walk into the woods, disappearing almost immediately in the dark. I noticed my heart was pounding. That really had me scared for a minute, the way he was being so pushy, trying to get me to follow him out there in the middle of the night. I'd never been on that trail, or really had any way to confirm that that's where it led to, so he really was asking me to follow him through the woods in the dark. It gave me a really bad feeling. I went back to the kitchen with my glass of water and just stood there for a few minutes to take it all in. And that's when I heard a loud crack sound resonate through the entire forest. Took me a couple seconds to realize it was a gunshot. I ran up to the door and opened it, looking out toward where I'd heard the shot from. My face went pale. It was in the direction Chandler just went, like somewhere right along the trail. Before I could even process the connotation of what that gunshot meant, Chandler came running out of the forest, sprinting toward my cabin and screaming for help. It was so dark that by the time I saw him, he was already essentially at my doorstep 10 seconds later. I was paralyzed in fear, and he just ran right past me and through the open door into my cabin. No one came chasing him from the woods, though. I turned around and looked at Chandler, hunched over in the hallway, looking at me and saying he'd been shot, sort of holding the side of his stomach. The way he was leaning, though, his shirt was lifted up on one side, and I could see the silver handle of a gun sticking out. My brain was moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour, adrenaline flowing and taking in every detail all at once as I stood there. In one quick motion, I stepped in, grabbed my car key, and ran out to my car. Chandler called my name a couple of times, but didn't try to stop me. I called the police as soon as I was away from the cabin. I then drove to the police station while a different officer went to the cabin to look around. And to make it all more unsettling, he found Chandler still there, sitting on the chair in the living room, apparently looking like he was just waiting for me. The officer cuffed him and tried to question him, but he didn't really say much. With some more digging, it turned out he had no cabin in the area. No address at all, actually, and they didn't even know his real name or identity. And they found his revolver, the one I saw under his shirt, was loaded, but missing a single bullet. It was all him just trying to get into my cabin, and knowing now that he had a gun on him the whole time made it even more horrifying. If I had believed him and went back inside the cabin alone with him, or had followed him out there into the woods, I don't think I'd be here right now.